Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today I'm going to be going over my Liverpool Regionals Top 8 report with Rapid Strike Malamar. Had a fantastic time with IRL tournaments coming back, so we're going to be getting into my rundown of the events, what I thought going in, and what potentially had changed about the 60 that I ended up playing, and a little bit of thoughts on where I'm going next with my testing pre-EUIC, and maybe even for Sao Paulo, for those of you attending that regional. But before we get into it, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store for all your PTCGO code needs. You can use code OMNIPOKE for 5% off on your order. Jumping back to it then, let's have a look at my pre-Liverpool thoughts. And obviously Salt Lake City was the large American regional happening 1 week before Liverpool, so naturally there were going to be some knee-jerks based on what happened there, and of course the Brisbane regional where Natalie Miller won with Mew, and it was basically a Mew fest in top 8. So of course, going into Salt Lake, Mew was extremely popular, and got a lot of day 2s. You can see 43% of Mew there. Pretty well established for a long time that Mew was probably the best, most consistent deck in the format. I still believe that to be true. Even though Salt Lake City had no Mew in top 8, it still was massively popular and strong and very capable of achieving a lot of CP. I think the big sort of change with Salt Lake City was the target on Mew's back was so crazy large, with higher path counts going into lists, with even more, Galarian, Moltres, Clara packages going into deck lists, Gengar coming out in force and doing very well in the event with one in top 4, one in top 8, and also Arceus Gengar won with Drew Kennett. So clearly Dark was out in full force and trying to battle the Mew. So this was definitely an interesting tournament to look on, especially comparing it to Brisbane where Mew was so dominant. It seemed like other decks were starting to get the technology, the answers to really tip that matchup to be close. And essentially, if you were piloting Mew, you knew that you were going to be in a really volatile field where everyone has tested a ton against Mew in the first place, and almost everyone has a game plan going in. And obviously, many decks are successful at executing that game plan a good amount of the time. And that's scary for someone like me, who had been on the Mew train this entire time. I'm usually a player that likes to stick to the top decks in the formats, and I do believe it gives me the best chance of performing well. But really it was Path that scared me more than anything, because you really can't interact with Path as Mew. Sometimes you just don't hit what you need off the judge, you can't play the game, and it only takes like one turn to be behind against like Arceus Intel or Gengar, where they just completely run away with the game, and you can't do anything. Doesn't matter how good your opponent is, how good you are, you look at your cards, you can't do anything with them if you're under a path lock, and that was a terrible feeling. And I just wanted to be able to play the game, essentially. So that was really off-putting for Mew. I was still tearing my hair out with Mew and still thought it gave me the best chance, because you can still beat the counters of Mew, don't get me wrong. And I do still think it's a solid play into any tournament, actually. It will always probably be like my number 2 choice now. But for me, I was really just worried about spaces. I was so worried that by playing 4 copies of Stadium, plus Echoing Horn, plus second choice belts, just to respect, the likes of Gengar, the likes of Arceus decks, that I was sacrificing consistency in Mirror, and it means that you have less control over the Mirror by playing less insta-play and less speed cards. Because then players who maybe were greedier than myself, playing less Stadiums, for example, or didn't play Pump Kaboo even, that was a card that some of my testing group was playing. Jack actually played Pump Kaboo in his top 64 Mew list as well. So, I was concerned that I was going so far on the greed side of things with Mew that I was taking out, like the 4th copy of Cram, the 4th copy of Phone, going down to like 1 Fog Crystal and awkward counts like that. But it just made me very nervous and made me think that I would have no edge in Mirror and actually be unfavored in Mirror almost, just inherently based on the list I was trying to build. So I hated that juggle where I really needed to still be strong and draw a lot of cards in Mirror, but needed enough to respect the wider field. And I just basically literally couldn't get down to 60 cards that I was happy with. So I ended up jumping ship. And anyone who'd been watching the streams recently over on Twitch, throughout my stressful ramblings about Mew as I was playtesting in the build-up to Liverpool, when I wanted to de-stress, I was always playing Malamar, and I really enjoy playing Mali. It's a very fun archetype, and I also feel, leading a few days up to the event, that based on SLC, it was actually fairly well placed, I think. This was probably one of the better events to be playing Malamar, because it hadn't had that crazy breakout yet. In Brisbane, it hadn't made top 8. It made top 16 in SLC, but only a couple placements towards the top. And I believed it was better placed in the format, thinking it had pretty strong matchups against most Arceus builds, especially the ones we saw out of Salt Lake, where even the straight Arceus Inteleon was going down to 1 quick shooting, and many of the Arceus decks were not playing water energy and moving towards a dark package or playing fighting energy for Zapdos. And I thought that was going to be the general mentality of Arceus going ahead, where more people wanted not only the answer to Mew, but also the answer to like Arceus Mirror / Gengar matchups because of its success in Salt Lake. So I thought that tech slots were shifting towards those sorts of archetypes and kind of away from just Mew in general, and those spaces would end up meaning that Malamar has a clearer path, really, because people would be moving away from Inteleon to play Bibarel, sort of seeing how well Drew's Bibarel engine worked, where you get to play 4 Ultra Ball as well as 4 Quick Ball, just to get Arceus into play, which is obviously great and important for Arceus decks. And even some of these Inteleon lists that we saw were only playing 1 Quick Shooting, which is obviously much easier to manage than 2 Quick Shooting. Now, it's still awkward if they play the 1 copy, because they can still do potential, like, net bouncing, right, and they can take multiple prize turns, but usually it's more manageable for Mali. So I think it was kind of underrepresented for how strong of a deck I actually felt it was in the meta. Early on, we did a very early top 10 like 3 weeks ago, and we put Mali in at 9th, but that was when Hooper Malt was doing very well and did well at the Full Grip tournaments when there was Wheezing, and Wheezing was obviously a huge issue for Malamar, but the Wheezing had since come out of the list to become the sort of Ian Robb, Arceus toolbox, or it had become Zapdos Moltres, basically, and Wheezing was more or less nowhere to be seen. So, yeah, overall, Malamar had a bit of a clear runway for Liverpool, and ultimately, I just felt more confident in myself playing the deck. Mew is a super stressful deck to play perfectly, honestly, because you need to literally know basically all your prize cards, and you need to micromanage every hand so well. And even then, you can see hands where you're just down to cram or you're at the whim of a judge at times. And that was not a feeling I wanted. I felt out of control of too many games. So I wanted more control with the tutoring of Inteleon. Now, it's kind of funny, and I was joking with a lot of my friends that, like, essentially there's, like, Genesect drawing, and that's, like, the random element of Mew that can all go wrong. Whereas Malamar compresses all of those individual Genesect draws into one big Cynthia's Ambition. But typically the ratios are on your side with Malamar, and especially as you move into the mid-game, I feel like your damage potential is absolutely insane with this deck. It's pretty crazy when you have the option to pick up an Octillery for a ton of damage, and when you have shady dealings from the Inteleon rather than the Drizzile, you have crazy burst potential. So I really do feel like this has a ton of great damage output available to it. So I think it was yeah, fairly well placed and was actually a really strong deck. So let's talk about the list. And actually posted the list that I played 2 days before on the channel. At this point, when I recorded this video, I was still on Mew. But at the end of this video, I said, this is my second choice. And I was very sincere about that. And this is proof, if nothing else, that Omnipoke does provide tournament-ready lists. Because I ended up rocking the 60. And if you actually watch the video and go back, I talk in great detail about Escape Rope, which is essentially the only card that was different from Gabe Shumway's top 16 list in SLC, and I was passionate about Rope being specifically strong against Mew, and I, of course, want to respect Mew as an archetype and their game plan into Malamar, and the Rope is just much easier to use than a boss, because you can use it alongside a Cynthia, of course, and actually damage things turn 2, which is actually super important in the Mew matchup, and I face a good amount of Mew in the tournament, so I can talk about how it goes. So yeah, very happy with the Rope change. I'm glad that I played enough games with this deck and respected Rope early enough. Actually, interestingly enough, again, in our top 10 3 weeks ago, I was mentioning Rope and how I thought it was good, but hadn't tested it enough. But by this point I had. So I'm happy that the Rope innovation was a thing. And interestingly enough, it's not just me playing Rope at Liverpool. I believe Stefan also played Escape Rope to top 16 with Mali. And I think There was also Max Roberts, who played my exact same 60 without even knowing that we were both going in with the same 60, possibly taking inspiration from the video, of course. But he also had a really good finish with Mali. It was either the top 16 or top 32. I can't remember. But yeah, both doing really well with very similar lists, actually. Of course, the second place list played no rope, but did play boss, which is interesting. And I'll talk about that later on, what I think about boss's orders. But yeah, this is the 60. I released it to the world a couple days before, which is kind of funny. People had the technology all along, but they... well, some people may have chosen to listen, some people may not have. So let's get into the round by round. Round one, I'm up against Mew, and it's up against Alex Pike, who is a UK veteran. I've played him many times. Always good fun to play against. This was a 2-0 victory for me. I was able to go second in both games. It's actually really interesting, the debate I was having with people about going first or second as the Mew player in this matchup, because obviously I'm someone that wants to go second every game as Rapid Strike Mali, but Mew actually has a very strong game plan even when they choose to go first, because they essentially just develop a VMAX faster. And although it means I have a better turn, it means they have a faster pressurization of a 330 hit point VMAX with Oricorio obviously reducing. And that's just way too much work and way too much pressure for Malamar for the most part, unless you super high roll an early game board with the full 6 board of Pokemon and you Cynthia's Ambition into a ton of Rapid Strike cards plus net for Octillery, and you need like a ton of deals on top of that, and you need to not draw into any of your bombs. And those are cards like Rescue Carrier, Ordinary Rod, Basic Psychic Energy. These are all things that you don't want to draw into, especially early game. You need to filter your deck for later on. So essentially, Mew typically is too big to deal with early game, and it's actually very scary. So you have to be able to rope and Cynthia's Ambition. That's usually the thing you want to do in this matchup. And it actually gets worse now that rope is a known quantity, because I think a Mew player should now double VMAX turn 2 and only put 2 Genesects down and put 2 single prize Pokemon into play. That should be their path now. I actually do still think, even though I beat a lot of Mews this weekend, Mew is still very favoured. But to be safe against rope now, you should be double VMAXing. And I would have lost basically every game against Mew if they double VMAXed on me turn 2 if they were the player going first, even if I had the nuts, basically. So I think Mew is actually super favoured into Mali. It shouldn't be a matchup they're afraid of. But there is definitely a debate about going first or second with Mew specifically, because it plays first and second very well. Because obviously if you make me go first, I need to have a far stronger hand without the help of Brawly, without the help of Keep Calling from Sobble, which is how I normally go wide. And against Mew, again, the hit points get so high as the VMAX that you really need to pop off with Octillery and Shady Dealings for the most part to actually get over the number, over the hill, right? So you need to have 9 Rapid Strike cards that you throw at them all at once. There's no point in damaging a Mew. It'll instantly jump back into the deck whilst taking a prize. So, yeah, against Alex, I was able to do the rope shenanigan thing. As soon as, like, it doesn't matter what they feed you, as long as you knock it out. It could be a 1 prizer, it could be a 2 prizer. It's usually just it's super easy to rope Cynthia and hit a number that can either be 6, right, to knock out a Genesect under Oricorio, because you need to hit 240, or 3 to knock out a 1 prizer if they just feed you Meloetta. If they feed you Oricorio, it's fantastic, because it's just much easier to deal with Mew later on in the game. So yeah, it's really easy from then on. And Alex did not attempt the Glistening Droplets for no knockouts. He was taking a knockout every turn, and that means that I just have the Ambition online. You really have to play like a setup deck with Malamar. Really try and work on making your board as strong as possible. Try and have double Drizzile developed when you're in that mid-game, so you can use Inteleon for double deals, plus Scoop Up Net for another double deal, and plus grabbing even more nets for potential pickups with Octillery. That's really what you have to do with this deck, and you really need to know when to hedge and go all in on KOs. It will be pretty apparent just based on a prize race. Mew keeps you very honest in a race when you need to like sacrifice your Octillery for tempo damage, and knowing that you can like rebuild that potentially later on in the game, because once you've taken a big VMAX KO, they are scared that you can do it again, right? Because you simply need to high roll a Cynthia for them to lose the game immediately. So after you've knocked out 1 VMAX, you then need substantially less on following turns. And as the game goes on, cards like Rescue Carrier become an 80 damage in one card draw, and cards like Scoop Up Net become like 160 damage because you can Rapid Strike Search plus pick up Artillery for a ton of burst potential. So as the game goes on, you've drawn out of all your bombs, and they become live targets for massive damage. So Mali gets incredible late on. So specifically in this matchup, I was able to do like really good rope shenanigans. I actually believe in the first game, Alex did double VMAX against me, but I can't remember what he did. I think he Glistening Droplets via the Mew VMAX and knocked out an Inkay rather than just trying to take out Sobble. And it meant that I was able to like Remoraid, double Ink, do the net, double Drizzile, do like the Scoop Up Net KO thing. So it just meant that I had like a pop off turn 2. And like I said, once you've dealt with the first VMAX, they don't want to feed you more VMAXs. It's too risky for them. So it doesn't matter that the artillery is no longer there. You can still rebuild slowly. You can do things like random mid-game Brawly just to get down Sobble Remoraid for another big turn later down the line. So that's things that you have to sort of manage with the Malamar overall. Okay, big chat there. But into round 2, we're up against Luke Williams, a great friend and testing partner. Known him for many years now. He's playing Mew. I believe very similar 60 to Jack, if not the same 60, like 1 or 2 cards difference. I lost a fairly long first game, so we were both trying to play pretty quickly in games 2 and 3. Game 2, I'm able to do the Rope Cynthia KO thing, and we come down to about 15 minutes left in game 3. We're trying to play pretty quickly. He makes me go second, and in doing so, he goes aggressively trying to get an early KO with a Meloetta, and in doing so, like, fills his board too awkwardly, so then he locks himself out of Psychic Leap plays, and from there, I'm able to just, like, take over the prize race and just push for KOs. So he took a risk to win game 3, like, very quickly and just, like, deplete my board. But it went against him, and it made it fairly easy for me to win because he didn't have the easy, like, start feeding me a ton of 1 prizes into, like, VMAXs at the right times by, like, knocking out Drizzles and whatnot to be awkward. So, yeah, I was able to win the best of 3 just because we were both trying to play as quickly as possible to get a game concluded because we're friends. We want to share the point. We want 3 points to go between us rather than have a natural tie because then there's 2 points shared between us. So when you're with friends, try and play fast so that one of you gets 3 points. It's better overall for you, even if it ends up being a feels bad moment for one of you. Into round 3, I'm up against my third Mew of the day, as expected, to be honest. And I spoke to a lot of people who ended up facing 6 or 7 Mews in the day. It sounds mad, but it actually happened. This time we come up against Daniel, who actually played the other strategy against me. So both Alex and Luke were taking KOs every turn to try and race me and make me have the most turn 2, which is reasonable, by the way. But Danielle went for a different strategy, which is the Glistening Droplets to set up multiple prize turns approach, which essentially locks you out of the Cynthia's Ambition. Very intelligent, limits my overall draw. The issue with this strategy is A, obviously you're not taking prize cards. B, I play Scoop Up Nets, so if ever I'm super concerned that you get too far ahead damage-wise, I can start picking stuff up if I need to. But the actual scariest thing is that Karina's focus is still a draw 6, or draw up to 6, and you're letting me build into Big Inteleon. Big Inteleon is why this deck does insane damage. If you just let me go double deal, net, double deal, net, double deal, I will still kill you. I will easily still reach 360. And yes, so I did that. And as soon as that happens, you can no longer do the sprinkle game plan because at any moment I can just kill you again. So you then basically have to abandon ship and just try and take KOs, which then just leads you back into the same dark alleyway of Cynthia's Ambition getting huge value. So yeah, the Oricorio Sprinkle approach is definitely good, but you have to pick your moments for it. And I still think if you leave me with like triple Drizzile, never gonna work. You will die. Like you will die even if you're not able to Cynthia's Ambition, or if you Cynthia's Ambition for like 3 cards. You need to do the sprinkle play if Octillery isn't on board, and if there's like only 1 or 2 Drizzles. If I've got full board, don't start sprinkling. It will end really bad for you, in my opinion. Into round 4, we come up against Raz. This is once again another Mew, so 4 rounds, 4 Mews in a row, and in this instance, so again, Rope is crazy, by the way. Rope is basically winning me like the majority of these games because Raz is also going for the attack with VMAX plan. Obviously, these players as well, they don't know that I'm playing Mali like round, like in before we start, right? So naturally, based on I can't even remember who's winning coin flips. If I'm winning, I'm choosing to go second. If they're winning, they're choosing to go first because they don't know what I'm playing at this point in the tournament. So when I'm going second, essentially, if I'm able to keep calling or Brawly, and then can go Rope Cynthia, which sounds crazy, but you basically need either Rope or Cynthia to be in your opening hand plus one Drizzile, or you need access to double Drizzile to be able to do that. And when you play 4 Incense, 3 Drizzile, 4 Level Ball, plus 4 Ambition, plus the Rope, you actually have a ton of outs to do that exact combo. And when you do that, you initiate the race, and you basically don't lose that race as long as you can KO Mew VMAX. And it's actually really easy to set up your hand to be able to do that, even though 360 is a big threshold, because you just start bouncing Shady Dealings and you sacrifice the artillery when you need to, in terms of take it out of play and deal with it later. So did that pretty well game 1. Raz makes me go first in game 2. Draw my opening hand. It's trash. I insta-scoop. This is something you really need to be careful of with Malamar. Time can slip away. And I literally look at my opening hand. I'm not getting donked, by the way. I have Inkay 1 Sobble. And I had Karina in hand, but not Cynthia. And you really need to have a big push. Like I said, by turn 2, there's a VMAX pressurizing you down. You need to be able to rope Cynthia. Otherwise, you can't win a race anymore against Mew if they play correctly. Here's what happens. They take first KO with VMAX. They tank a hit if you can't do the rope shenanigans, and they leap into a one prizer. Then they attack with another one prizer, then they attack with another one prizer, because Oricorio is a valid attacker, because they can sprinkle KO and Inkay. And by that point in the game, it doesn't matter that the Oricorio goes down. They only need Mew VMAX to tank for 1 turn to win a prize race against you, because they initiate the race more often than not, especially if they go first, okay? So they basically need to take KO with Mew, tank, take KO with Mew leaping, or in my case, because I don't play boss, I play rope, they can even just retreat into a one prize and attack with that. So they need to tank hit, take prize, tank hit, take second prize with Mew either leaping or like retreating, and feeding a one prizer, or attacking with one prizer, attacking with one prizer, attacking with one prizer. So they've taken 4, you've taken 3 because you've knocked out 3 one prizers. Then they leap again into a 2 prizer, taking them down to 1 prize, and I can only physically take 2 prizes because they've only left 2 prizes in play. So that's how Mew wins, as long as they tank that first hit. It's super important, and it's super basic actually, but the thing that the Mew has to manage is obviously they require sparkles to be able to keep doing this attack with one prizer shenanigan deal, or they need to keep Mews around to be able to evolve into VMAXs to leap when they have to. Because of course, like, either you can do tablet leap plays to knock out Mali, or you can do boss leap plays, or you can be sparkling attaching to Meloetta, attacking with Meloetta to take KOs. And same thing for Oricorio, because there's almost always an Inkay lying around for them to just sprinkle onto. And you rarely will have the chance to play around that, nor would you really, because they don't have to attack with the Oricorio, they can just do the leap play anyway, and that's basically bossing anything on your board, or tableting through anything on your board. So yeah, where am I going with this? Yes, I did the super early scoop game 2, and Raz was pretty surprised, I guess. I don't even let them have the opportunity to, like, set up and sparkle and whatnot. I don't even need to care about how good their hand is. It doesn't matter. I won't have time to win a game 3 unless I have 20 minutes. Because Mew games have a lot of actions. Like, even fast playing Mew players need to physically shuffle the deck a lot of times. They have Rotom phones, they have tons of ball search, and they actively are drawing a lot of cards with Fusion Strike. Then they have to assess the new cards and map out the best hand. Like, even the fastest thinking Mew player will take like 10 minutes for the first like 2 turns if they're drawing well. So yeah, I gave myself time to win game 3. I chose to go second, of course, which is a huge relief for Malamar. It's just such a strong deck when it gets to go second, and yeah, we're able to beat Raz in that 3rd game. So know when to scoop with Malamar. Super important to keep an eye on the time. I was wearing the watch throughout all of day 1, and it was super valuable to me. Next up, we're against Miloslav. Very, very good player. He was telling me that he basically knew the right strategy against the Mew, and I saw it to fruition in game one, take the L, but were able to go second in game two and get the big rope plays off. And then in game three, I actually prize rope, and I'm terrified, but Milo has a really bad start and is passing into me, which is super fortunate because I feel like when I prize rope, I should be losing that game three, honestly. But he just does badly. His opening hand is bad, and it's rare. This is round 5, and it's the first time I've seen a Mew brick in this third game. And we're able to just like churn through attacks, because when Mew's not doing the ideal strategy, it's good for them to pass into you, because then you're not getting Cynthia's ambition value. So your deck is still kind of like weak, and you can only draw up to 6 with Karina, but it's still enough for me to get over the line into like Genesect V and into Mew Vs just about. So yeah, able to take the win against Milo there. In round 6, I faced my first non-Mew deck, which is a huge relief, up against Tubbs, who again, long-standing UK player, played him a ton of times back in the day. Good to see him again. And he's playing Arceus with Moltres, Zapdos, Hooper, Baby Moltres, that sort of thing. Notably not playing Inteleon, though, which means that I have a much better win con against him. Tubbs, basically his main defense is Marnie, and he plays Collapsed, and Collapsed is actually really annoying for Mali, because your ideal board state requires all 6 spaces, and it basically just makes your scoop up nets of Inteleon way weaker, because typically you want a scoop up net to grant you 3 shady dealings. You get the double dip from the Inteleon, but you also get the dip back on the Drizzle at the same time, so a Collapsed actually really limits your damage output. And I found some awkward spots here and there, and Marnie's really did pressurize me to points where I had to go all in against Tubbs, actually. So although it says like a clean win-win here, and he wasn't playing Inteleon, which actually does give me a much better matchup, the well-timed Marnies and the Collapsed was super scary against me, to be honest, and I had to all in with Rapid Strike Tentacles a couple of times because I'd drawn too many of my bombs early on against him in some of these games. So I was just like holding on to Rod Carrier. So my Cynthia's was getting like only 5 cards, and I didn't have any banked damage. So I basically had to just all in myself into top deck mode, and hoping on prizes. Fortunately, I prized 2 Cynthia's Ambition in the game, and obviously you check these sorts of things at the start of the game, and I search the deck naturally so much via Octillery deal like every turn, and keep calling and brawling and whatnot, that I'm able to see my deck a ton, so I really have good knowledge of what's in my deck and how many bombs are remaining, and how many Cynthias are remaining as well. So I took some big hedges in the game to push for sort of greed knockouts to keep up pressure and keep up in a race, knowing that I had good prize outs. I think I remember having a 66%er when I went to a 0-card hand of hitting Incense or Cynthia's Ambition. So that was pretty good in the end to sort of crawl over the line. Looks like a nice 2-0, but I was really close to losing game 2, and that would have ended up in a draw because there would not have been time for a game 3. So yeah, it was actually a really tough game, despite him not playing like Inteleon with quick shooting and Aqua Bullet stuff. In at round 7, it's another Arceus deck. This time it's Matthew with Arc Inteleon. This was similar to the Ian Robb list, as far as I could tell, where it had Baby Molt also, and had the Water Energy quick shooting shenanigans, so had to be a little bit nervous about Aqua Bullet double KO plays. That's where our loss comes in, and game 3 is super tight, actually, and we're just able to get over the line there. So yeah, actually super close series, and it was nice sitting down to Matthew, had good conversations, but it was a pretty stressful game overall for both of us. I was the only 6-0 at the time, so Matthew wasn't guaranteed. So this was sort of like their winning in type scenario, their first of the day. And yeah, really close series, but we were able to get the job done. Again, some very well-timed Marnies. It's really weird that like I'm talking about Marnie so much now, but it's because I've just faced 5 Mews where I'm able to construct hands perfectly and know my next turn like mapped out. Because as much as it's important to guarantee your damage on that turn, it's also about knowing your outs for the following turn and how much you can push pre-Cynthia. That's what's really huge. You want to thin your hand with relevant cards pre the Cynthia as much as possible. Like, get your Fog Crystal prepared, get your next Inkay prepared, whether it's via Carrier or via, like, Rod Fog or something like that. get your Malamar prepared, all pre the Cynthia, because then every time you're drawing with Cynthia, all of it can be chucked back into the deck, essentially. That's all you need to do, which means that you can have these crazy spikes of 310 damage if required into a V-Star, or 360 if it's into a Mew. So these are the things you need to bear in mind. But yes, overall decent series there, and came down to turns of time actually in game 3. I think I was able to get it done on turn 0. So then in at round 8 we faced another Arceus. So the Arceus were rising to the top in day 1 for certain, and they ended up doing just as well as Mew, making day 2 this time. We had a win-loss win here. Connor was playing a barrel engine alongside the Arceus and played Water Energy with Callie. Did power up his Luminion a couple times to try and force single prizes in my way as well, which is a pretty sneaky tactic to try and buy some turns here and there. I actually drew fairly rough in this series, and I remember there was in game 3 I failed to KO 3 Arceus V-Stars, and that was like wild. I had so many bombs in my hand in that series. And Connor was playing towards time at that point, because he did have a DPL. Because in game 3, again, because the clock was running down, he forgot to take a prize card turn 2. Neither of us noticed it, and on turn 3, he takes another prize card after Marnieing and using Trinity Nova. And that's when we realised when he should be taking the next prize that we'd forgotten it. So he did have a DPL in this instance. And it meant that he was like dancing around the V-Stars, but weirdly enough, I still ended up having to knock out the Calyrex for the last 3 prizes anyway. It just meant that he maybe could have played differently, but yeah, failing to KO 3 V-Stars was actually like a super low roll from me, which was kind of funny. But we were coming towards turns and he was choosing not to attack me. He was just trying to bounce around the V-Stars. So naturally my push potential was worse. I needed to keep, like, I could have taken the 2 prize on Arceus, but it didn't change that I still needed to deal with the Calyrex, so I wasn't able to scoop up net my Octillery, because then I was paranoid that I wouldn't be able to get enough damage the following turn for the Ice Rider where it actually mattered. So yeah, Connor was trying to play towards that time, those last few turns of time, but I was able to get over in the end. But again, pretty tight series. Like, honestly, it doesn't take much for this deck to, like, it's quite volatile against Marnie, right? It's because you're so all in on basically your incenses, your big deal, your scoop up nets, and just your Cynthias. And as the game goes on, your Cynthias get fewer and fewer. So the Marnies get very strong. So those are things to bear in mind when you're playing this deck. It's like trying to filter your bombs whilst also, especially against Arceus decks, play as few incense as possible and as few nets as possible, because these are so powerful later on in the game. Same thing for Rescue Carry. You can't really help it if it comes into your hand early, but saving these for late game is cracked, honestly. So just bear those things in mind. But yeah, close game against Connor as well. In round 9, we face Sander, teammate, who is playing Zoroark control with the Cincino package and using Happy Match Eldegoss alongside Team Yell's Cheer to be the Infinite Loop, which is very scary. Now, Sander plays like a ton of walls and all these other things for different situations, but essentially against me, because I have Octillery and Inteleon as my engine, and my draw supporter is Cynthia's Ambition, he was simply trying to wall with Galarian Weezing in his deck to turn off all my abilities and slowly Birdkeep into Eldegoss to float up back into the deck and put the Weezing back active again to do his loop. So he was doing little bits of chip damage here and there, but crucially, he does play energy removal in the form of Rabombi, which moves energy around, as well as Crushing Hammers, which is obviously coin flip based. Also has Flannery for my special energy. I play 4 Spiral. And also plays Dusknoir, which turns off my Spiral energy to no longer act as psychic energy. So at that point, Spiral energy is only useful to me with quick shooting, and that's only 70 damage, which isn't enough to deal with much. So actually, Escape Rope is huge in this matchup as well, because it's an extra switch out to get around Galamine Boss. So I had 4 nets, 1 rope, and 1 tower as well, which was usable on all my Rapid Strike Pokemon. So it meant that I was keeping Drizzles around, threatening to evolve them into Quick Shooting Inteleon at any point, which is kind of cool. So yeah, lots going on here. San had a pretty bad start, and I was able to get rolling with my Mali pre-Weezing. It basically took him a long time to find Weezing, And looking at his list now, he plays like 1 Incense, 2 Ultra, and 1 Wheezing, so it's not easy. Like, he has to kind of raw draw into it with Make Do. So it took him a while to develop that. So I got just like too many prizes ahead, I think. He was kind of not happy about making a Birdkeeper play. He made a Birdkeeper play into a Cutiefly, which has natural free retreat, but his own Galamine was out, so he ended up having to attach retreat out of there just to draw those 3 cards. And I think it ended up scuffing his float up gameplay later on in the game, because of course when he puts his own Dusknoir into play, Double Turbo isn't just 1 attachment for float up, he has to weave turns out of Eldegoss by attaching twice to the card instead. So yeah, pretty awkward for Sander. He also prized Ribombee, so wasn't able to access that, just used Cutiefly as a pivot essentially here and there. But yeah, it was actually a really close series because I play that many switch outs essentially, and because I have a 1 energy attachment Mon, even though I was sat there for a long time just draw passing under Wheezing, as long as I know I have the 2 Psychic and the Ornery Rod available, and at that point it doesn't even matter that Spiral Energy does nothing for me, I can close out the game just by attacking slowly, even just like 2-shotting Wheezing, because fortunately his only heal is via the 2 Scoop Up Nets, which aren't recoverable, and Birdkeeper. And Sharon's, which is only for colourless Mons, and obviously Wheezing isn't that. So I was able to get over the line with Mali there, and I do actually think that my list is favoured against Sander's deck in its current iteration. I ended up playing him again in day 2, and I do lose that game. But really, if you're coming onto this deck in the ladder, you really want to be attaching your Rapid Strike energies as early as possible, because these become unusable late game when a Dusknoir is developed. But your Psychic energy are always good, and essentially Sander's only defense is using Ribombee, which moves it off onto other things, essentially to discard them, because he moves them to Drizzles and they insta-discard. But it doesn't matter at that point, because he's basically trading a prize to do the Ribombee thing, and he can't do that very often. Usually it's much better for him to go into Wheezing to buy more time to actually try and stall me out. But resource-wise, as long as you don't prize things like Ornery Rod, you should actually be fine in this matchup. I think I was pretty favoured into Sander once I realised his game plan. And going into game 2, I was super confident in the game plan, but the draws went all the wrong way. So yeah, I'll get into that later. But yeah, ending the day 9-0 was surreal, especially because I went into this round basically just on a reconnaissance mission, because even though he's my teammate, I had no idea what was going on in his list. I saw a very early iteration of what Sander was going for, but I had no idea what was actually in the 60 he chose on the day. It's Sander at the end of the day. Control extraordinaire. And we'll find all sorts of angles and cards that you have to read to be able to get the dub. And his list is super cool, by the way. But Rapid Mali is actually, I think it's an L for him very often. He can probably give me a long few paragraphs of why he thinks it's okay. But I think as long as you control your resources carefully, because he doesn't have much hand disruption at all, he can't stop the fact that you have 4 single attachment attacks that take prizes, and it takes him a few turns to stop the spiral energies from being 4 additional energy to attack with. So I actually think you should be able to get 6 attacks in as long as you're only attaching energy to take KOs to win the game. So bear that in mind. I think this matchup, if you are facing on the ladder, is very favourable for Mali. Just try to use your spiral energies to attack with early game and save the psychics for later. But yeah. So we come back in day 2. We're up against Faris Sakum, and that should be a familiar surname to you. Sammy is the best UK player of all time and is probably easily in the top 10 players of all time. And some of you may not know the name Sakum, but holy... absolute titan of the game from back in the day. Crazy player. And Faris essentially has grown up learning from some of the best minds in Pokemon of all time. So he is certainly a threat and has played plenty himself. So he's actually not playing Mew. Oh no, I've got the slide wrong. He's playing Arc Intel. I was definitely copy-pasting Mew because I faced so many of them. But yeah, he was playing Arc Intel. But honestly, it didn't matter what he was playing because He made me go first. He donked an Inkay after I panic Karina's focused for 2 cards. I scoop. We go to game 2, and I go second, and I'm still in a hand where I Karina's focus panic draw 3 cards. I get myself 1 Inkay and keep calling, but by that point, he's a smart enough player to know that he just needs to feed me 2 prizer, 2 prizer, 1 prizer, 1 prizer. 2 prizer, 2 prizer, 1 prizer, 2 prizer. And that's just too much resources for me to deal with. I'm just too far behind on a prize race after I failed to knock out his V-Star on turn 2. Because my start was just so slow. And he was playing around rope by double V-Starring early. So he did everything right, even though we had like a 10-minute series. Absolutely destroyed me. Like, essentially a donk against an Inkay, and then just a panic draw with Karina, where I got the Inkay to be alive in the game. But essentially I had to pass the next turn to keep calling just to rebuild a board. So yeah, it was just the worst draws possible after having a bit of a heater day 1. The 14-0 dream died very quickly against Faris. In around 11 then, we play Sander, and I've just described how I think the game can go very well for you as Mali. But here's where it can go badly. It can go wrong when you can't draw into your Spiral Energies, are forced your first 4 attachments of the game to all be your Psychic Energies, after rodding and having to fog stuff back out. And Sander hit all 4 Crushing Hammer heads. Now, the game actually came down to... I think we both agreed this pretty much, that the game came down to his final Crushing Hammer had to be heads, because it was my final Psychic Energy. If it's heads, I simply announce an attack to win. If it's tails, I can't take my final prize to win the game. It's literally that simple. The only thing that could have happened if he had like not committed to this Crushing Hammer gameplay, essentially, was that he could have powered up a Zoroark to attack me with Night Days to KO my last Psychic Energy, like KO a Malamar for my last Psychic Energy. But because he was doing the float up gameplay, he wasn't even eyeing that up. He basically put himself all in on this Crushing Hammer to win him the game. So I actually think, looking back, it was probably an error from his part to not attach at least one of the turns to a Zoroark. It may have been just simply down to how many energy he had accessible in his deck, where he had to loop the Eldegoss, otherwise he'd deck himself, rather than spend 1 energy in his hand to be a Zoroark. But I feel like he could have taken a turn off Supporter just to, like, not bird keeping, just to attach to a Zoroark at some point to threaten a Night Days KO to remove a Psychic Energy, because at that point he developed a Dusknoir. So, yeah, unfortunate that he got 4 Hammerheads against me, and even more unfortunate, like, compounding the fact that I only saw my... Well, I didn't see my Spiral Energies all game, and obviously I don't have the access to Artillery, because he got early Wheezing against me, so I couldn't tutor out the Spirals. I basically only had tutor for Fog Crystal, so it's like, it's reasonable that happened, but it's just a shame that he found Wheezing early enough to deny Artillery, so that I couldn't find Spirals, so I had to use Psychics for him to then Crushing Hammer punish me every single time. Like, as soon as I attached a Psychic, first thing, Crushing Hammer heads. Crushing Hammer heads, Crushing Hammer heads, 4th Crushing Hammer heads. It's really sad. So, like I said, I'm favored against Sander. I'd have actually liked to hit him in top 8. It's a shame I didn't, actually. But yeah, like I said, super cool deck, and I think he auto-wins a lot of other matchups, by the way. It's just the Rapid Mali is actually one of his more shaky ones. So, still needing, by the way, just 1 win to start IDing, we finally face another Mew back in our comfort zone. And this is a similar situation to earlier on in day 1, where I win that long game 1. Lennart makes me go first. I see my opening hand. It's not a donk, but I still just say to myself, this isn't a strong enough hand. Let's scoop, give myself a good 20 minutes to win the last game. And yeah, I do think that essentially when I go second and actually have Sobble or Brawly, or like Brawly level ball, and have a workable turn 2, I just don't think you lose as this deck, like, simply put. As long as you don't prize rope. Like, if you're able to rope Cynthia, I think it's a low roll for you to miss most of the time. Even when Mew is doing, like, boss Remoraid, or knockouts one of your Sobble. Like, if knocking out active Sobble is actually, I think, quite smart, because Drizzle isn't a bomb in my hand that I can draw. Even though Artillery is, like, very scary to leave up, because that can be 120 damage at a single card. So I think it's actually correct to do with Remoraid, but it's a sigh of relief whenever I draw Drizzles, because I can just put them into play. and get dealing going. So yeah, and Leonard again, seeing that I'd initiated a prize race, started to do the old pass shenanigans stuff to like slow down my roll, where I'm just going Cynthia, big load of damage, Cynthia, big load of damage. But I was still able to do the bounce shady dealings thing and take prizes slowly against him. So yeah, pretty scary. It's always like a really bad feeling where I win like a 25-minute long slog of a game 1 where I'm not able to miss a beat. And then I look at my opening hand, have to insta scoop, and then go to game 3. It's a really bad feeling, but it's the safest way to actually win, I think. Because I do feel like going second against Mew is pretty strong for the deck as long as you don't prize rope. So we are then able to ID twice. So as soon as I get to that 10-2 record, I'm on 30 points and I'm able to double ID. Now, I was the only person on 30 points, actually, and there was a 29-pointer, Jack, who ID'd with me. And we had a discussion where it wasn't a super safe ID, and I actually offered them the ID at any point in the game. I said before as we were setting up, I said, I'll offer you the ID at any point in the game. And they were also playing Rapid Strike Malamar, actually. So I'm surprised that they chose to ID, even though I offered the ID at any time, because at that point, there's no reason to not start playing me and see if you're beating me. But anyway, I got the ID and was able to ID twice, because then in the last round, I faced Robin, who was on 31 points themselves, so we could both do the safe ID to 32. So I was actually kind of scared that being the only 30-pointer, I'd had to play another round. And there was actually a chance that if Tord had beaten Robin, and if there was no conclusion in one of the other games, I might have had to play my last round being on 31 and not being safe. So I was actually kind of scared and happy that Robin was able to beat Tord, because then he's on the right record, whereas Tord would have been on 30 points needing to play again or have a risky ID, and I wasn't sure if he would do that. So yeah, in the end, we ID with Robin to guarantee that top 8. The bad news is the bracket comes up, and I certainly don't want to face Robin. I think of this top 8, I'm happy facing both Mews, as you've seen. I've already beaten Lennart, and I've beaten Miloslav, who is basically playing the same 60 as Rudhoff. So being XO against Mew in the tournaments, I was much happier seeing any of those. I personally think I have a strong matchup against Sander. And based on Alessandro's list, I think it's a little bit awkward for me, because Crobat VMAX is actually kind of weird, where it can keep hitting and running with weakness and taking KOs and feeding 1 prizes. So it's a matchup where they can initiate a race. But I think you can still win that matchup. It's just a little bit awkward for you. And Chriso did play Inteleon Water Energy, I believe. It may have been Inteleon Dark Energy, but I definitely would have preferred that. And interestingly, Brennan doesn't play Quick Shooting Mally, so I'm actually super favored in the Mally mirror against Brennan's list, because he doesn't have the option to Quick Shooting Net, Quick Shooting Net, Quick Shooting Net, but I do. So essentially, I always win the mirror against Brennan's 60, simply because he doesn't play Quick Shooting. So I would have loved every matchup more than Robin. I essentially needed to dodge and weave Robin for as long as possible, but unfortunately, that's not how it played out. So we saw Lennart versus Rudolph in a mirror, Sander versus Arceus Intel Crobat. I haven't actually spoken to Sander about his top 8 game and how that matchup goes for him. Arceus Jets in general seem to be awkward, right? Just because they have so much energy acceleration that it could easily be an issue. So I don't know what Sander's game plan is in the matchup, outside of try and use his Altaria pot helmet strategy and remove as many energy as possible from Inteleon. I gotta think that's his best route. I can't remember how many Water Energy Alessandro played. I think it was 2 copies of Water Energy. So I don't know how it went wrong for Sander, honestly. Couldn't tell you. It could have even come down to the top cut rules, where there's more time for Alessandro to get themselves into a game 3 situation, and as soon as Alessandro gets into a game 3, all he needs to do is start taking the first prizes and he wins, right? So it could just be Sander being a victim of the top cut rules. That's the risk you always play with Control. Top cut is always going to screw you over, but Sander does so well at getting to top 8 in the first place that I think it's one of those sorts of things. So yeah, the reason why Robin is such a bad matchup for me is that he's playing Quick Shooting Yoga Loop, as well as Rapid Flow, and I play no boss, so I can't disrupt any of it, essentially. I only play the rope that can sometimes like cheese a KO on a Sobble early and slow his development that little bit. But Robin clearly knows the matchup well. He was setting up yoga loops with quick shooting, setting them up with Hooper, just hitting me for 90 into the Mally, which is then quick shooting plus Metacham away from doing a free loop. So yeah, going into the game, I already knew it was a really bad matchup. But game one, he makes me go first, and he donks me with a Hooper. And game two goes much longer, and I'm trying really my best. I am trying to put 3 Inkays into play and 1 Malamar active. So my board is triple Inkay, Mally active, and 2 Drizzle/Inteleon in play. I go without the Octillery all game because I'm terrified of Yoga Loop plus Rapid Strike knocking out all 3 of my purple boys, so that I simply can't attack and he gets free turns to do whatever he wants. But in doing so, my hand is trash, right? And Robin is rarely ever taking prizes because he's just setting up Yoga Loop math as much as possible. So I can't draw off of Cynthia. I can only draw off of Karina's, which I have to Drizzle for, which sucks as well. So I was trying my best, but it felt fairly unsurmountable when you don't play boss's orders. If you play boss, maybe you can do some stuff, but I still feel like you can get looped multiple times in the matchup, and that's just going to be really rough. So we were by far the first top 8 to finish after a quick donk and then like a 15-minute game where I can see him. Like, the thing about Robin's deck is I play no hand disruption, and he plays Shady Dealing and Raihan so much that I see everything that he's accessing. I can see his like 10 card or like 20 card hand, and I know that he's got it all there ready to go over the next 2 turns. So I literally, after the first Yoga Loop is set up, I basically just insta-scoop because I know that the prizes are simply mapped out and I can't do anything against him. So yeah, unfortunately the list is just not prepared for his archetype. Of course, it was new and unknown until this weekend, so I couldn't have planned for the matchup more than the theory that I went for, which was just try and have all 4 Inkays down, so I at least have an attack, and it means that he at least has to end the game with Urshifu and can't sort of weave it in at any point. But yeah, that's what I attempted. I don't actually know how Brennan tried to play the matchup, because he also didn't play Manaphy, but Brennan did play boss, so at least he can try and disrupt Urshifu against Robin. That's like the only thing he can do differently to me. But yeah, overall, that's how my top end went. I really wanted to dodge him. Anyone else I feel fairly confident into, to be honest. Maybe not the Crobat. That would have been scary. And Mew is always scary, but you can get the job done against them as long as you win the opening coin flip and go second, I guess. That's kind of the big idea. It's actually really scary for Rapid Strike Malamar the longer you go in a tournament, because more people will make you go first, and the deck is way worse. So the fact that I went on that 9-0 streak shows like it's much easier to do well day 1 with this deck, because people don't know what you're playing for a certain amount of time. By day 2, everyone knows you're playing a certain deck, and they make you go first, and that's really bad. You really don't want to go first with Mally. It's super vulnerable. So yeah, that is the 2-0 that I talked about with Robin. I don't think I could have done much else. I think the only other thing that I was thinking of in the game was to have a board state of, instead of Inkay Mally, it was like all 4 Mally, and I had to net up my Sobbles as well, so that I had no Yoga Loop targets, or would have made him spend an extra turn doing a Hooper target. But the issue with that is you just have no draw, and you're holding all of these cards that you can't thin out of your deck because you're holding so many Drizzles and Inteleons that you have to use early game. So, yeah, I really don't know what I could have done too differently. I guess I need to talk to Brennan about how it went, but I think it's pretty well covered by the fact that they have Hooper, Baby Molt as like 1 prize attacking threats, as well as Yoga Loop and Rapid Flow. Maybe Robin wasn't allowed to use Rapid Flow against Brennan just because of the fear of boss, and had to time his Yoga Loops better. Maybe that's why it was slightly closer than my matchup, where I had to play super weird board because I was terrified and had no disruption for his Urshifu, unfortunately. But yeah, the rest of Cut went like this. Lennart was able to beat Rudolph, and Alessandro was able to take the dub against Sander, and Brennan was able to take the dub against Chriso, and then Brennan was able to beat Mew to make it to finals. Robin was able to beat Arceus, Crobat, and then it came down to Robin beating another Mali Inteleon in finals. And from what I heard, like, I'd already left at this point by finals because I had to have a drive home and I have other people with me in the car. I was a designated driver, making everyone wait. But I heard it was a slightly closer finals than my top 8 game. I think that basically comes down to Brennan playing boss and me not, so Robin could do basically whatever he wanted against me. But yeah, I heard it was slightly closer, but I feel like it's really bad for Mali anyway, and I don't think Manaphy particularly helps, to be honest with you. I think boss helps a lot, but that's about it. So yeah, that's a lot of talking. I've already been going on for 55 minutes, wow. But based on these results, here's the breakdown of top 42. Lots of Mew still, lots of Arceus still. They're basically both tier 1 now. Like, it doesn't seem like Mew is tier S anymore. I think Arceus has proved itself with its variety of attackers that it is good enough to be tier 1 as well alongside Mew. These are like the two pillars at the top. Mali did pretty well. 7 in top 42 is huge, actually. Way bigger than Salt Lake. And Gengar did significantly worse. I think that's just a victim of Gengar doesn't survive with the target on its back. When people play Zapdos, when people play random Urshifu packages, not only Robin playing, this wacky deck, but also lots of Arceus players just threw in Urshifu. Lots of them threw in Zapdos. There was still that Sandaconda like you saw. So there's a lot of reason why Gengar can't stand up to the spotlight. He is an archetype that really has to pick its moments to perform, because it's good into Mew and Arceus, brackets as long as Arceus doesn't play fighting dudes. And now Urshi is potentially a threat in the game. I do think to pick up and pilot Robin's deck, you need a brain the size of Robin, which I think is about 3 other people. So I think it's going to be really hard for Urshifu to do this well in a tournament again. But we've got the list now. We have the technology. It's possible that if you really put the work in for EUIC, you could probably get it done. If I was going to Sao Paulo, I would basically ignore Robin's list because you don't have enough time to play well enough with the deck. Personally, I just think it's not possible to pick up and learn that deck quickly enough and know every matchup well enough. Maybe you can learn the Mew matchup and the Arceus matchup in time. But not every other matchup in the game. And you kind of have to do that with Urshi. And it's a very, they call it checkmate, it's kind of an overused phrase. But it definitely is, it has some precise game plans, and it can go all awry based on, Marnie's just being bad for you. So, yeah, things to worry about there. Suicune and Ludicolo just one made top 42. It's not an easy deck to pick up and pilot from what we can see. And, yeah, it still needs some good fortune here and there about not leading Suicune and whatnot in certain matchups, especially against Mew. But yeah, Rapid Mali being so on the radar is actually quite bad for it. So I think there could be, once again, that uptick in Arceus. I honestly think Arceus Intel with 1 Water Energy, 1 Quick Shooting, 1 Zigzagoon is actually pretty bad for the deck. I really don't want to put Manaphy in because it just means your Mew matchup gets way worse. Arceus with Big Charm also just gets way worse for you. You just draw too many things that are bad for you. So I think I picked a good time to play Mali, and I think a few other people who were brave enough to play Mali did very well with the deck and benefited from the format we were going into. But I think now that it's on the radar, it's a much riskier play. So something to bear in mind. Control for EUIC is interesting as well. Changing up Sander's amalgamation. I'm sure he'll do a better job of explaining why every card was in there for whatever matchup, but do know that Rapid Mali is good against his current iteration. It does need some work. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the weekend. Once again, I'm absolutely shattered, but I had a really good day of Pokemon, and it was really fun doing some Sushi high rolling throughout the weekend. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I do think Mew is actually still the strongest deck in the format, obviously, and I will be experimenting with a Marnie coming into my list. I think that might be the new hotness for Mew, because as we've seen from Robin, Clara, Galarian Bird is just too good against Mew right now. So disrupt those Inteleon hands. There are too many decks out there right now that are getting away with murder. Suicune Ludi, Rapid Mali to an extent, Galarian Moltres, like, Clara packages, this Exodia thing from Robin, it's just too much. People are being able to build up too many good hands, and Arceus is basically the only deck in format right now playing Marnie, and even then, some of them play, like, Mustard instead and only play, like, one Marnie, so people are being able to build too many Exodia combos, so I'm starting to think one Marnie in Mew ruins everything for all of these greedy lists. That's what I'm going to be testing going towards EUIC. I did get a ticket. I'm not going to go into it because it was a bit too farcical today, and I want to stay positive and talk about my amazing experience in Liverpool. But yes, hopefully I'll see you as well there at EUIC. And yeah, I'm going to go have a lie down because I'm still shattered from the tournament over the weekend. Crazy times. See you in another video soon. Cheers.